Hello and welcome to the Total Saints podcast. We are the weekly Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. This podcast is being live streamed on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch and YouTube. Going to be checking your comments as we go through the show. So if you're watching live and you've got something to say, do get involved in the conversation. Our podcast is entirely supported by our loyal Patreon community. Without you, we couldn't make this show each week. And we have one new Patreon member joining us in the last week. So a huge thank you and a welcome to Colin Lewis, who's joined the Bobby Stokes tier. Thank you to Colin. We really do appreciate your support. And I'll have more on how you can join us in just a moment. Coming up this week on the podcast, after that heavy defeat at Sunderland, we were told that lessons would be learned and we'd see a reaction against Leicester. Well, couldn't have gone any worse, really, could it? Going to review that game and ask just how do we stop conceding so many goals? We go again on Tuesday evening when Ipswich are the visitors to St Mary's. Ben from the Blue Monday podcast will join us very soon to preview that one. And that's followed by another long trip north to Middlesbrough at the weekend. And Dana from the Boro Breakdown Podcast is going to be on later to help us preview the game. My name's Martin Starke, and I'm joined by our regular contributors, Steve Grant, who's the owner of SaintsWeb. Glen Cour is back with us after his holidays, the writer of the blog League One -10. And Alfie House is the senior Southampton reporter for the Daily Echo. All underpinned by our TSP patrons. This is episode 243 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, before we kick off the football chat, just a quick shout out for our patron community. The monthly contributions fully support the show, and we couldn't make TSP without their support. There are 4 tiers ranging from £5 to £20 per month. And aside from supporting the podcast, each of those tiers has different perks like access to an ad-free version of the pod, exclusive TSP t-shirts and merch bundles. There's the TSP FPL, access to our TSP events, and much more. Going to be checking in on the FPL scores later in the season, and there's more on how to access some of the TSP events coming up in the next few months. If you do want to get involved and support TSP each month, you can head over to patreon.com/Total Saints podcast for more details. All the links are in the podcast show notes and the YouTube description. So on to the football. Friday night, under the lights, in front of the TV cameras, and we were all hoping for a positive reaction after that Sunderland defeat. What we saw was nothing short of a shambles, really. Glenn, you missed the fun last week. Now, you may have thought you missed the annual heavy defeat, but it seemed like it was more of the same on Friday. I don't think they really learnt many lessons at all.
No, we were brilliant for the first 15 seconds, and then we gave the ball away, and the ball ended up in our net from our own kickoff after 21 seconds, as we all saw. Yeah, quite a special start when you would think that you'd be just trying to keep things tight at the opening of a game, which is, at the end of the day, was against the team that's favourites to win the league this year. So it was always going to be a very difficult game. And, you know, letting in a goal after 21 seconds obviously sets the tone for the rest of the game. And to be honest, we didn't really do anything other than be a complete and utter shambles whenever Leicester had the ball. For 90 minutes, 2-0 down after, what was it, about 15, when we gave the ball away yet again, close to our goal. Got one back through putting their defence under a little bit of pressure. And from then till half time, we actually looked quite decent. and it, it didn't look beyond the realms of possibility that we'd get back into it. And just when a normal team would have some sort of game management and get to half time just the 2-1 down, and then you can change a few things, tweak a few things, and then hopefully get back into it second half. We let in another goal with horrendous, weak defending, people bouncing off of tackles, people not picking up runners. Our midfield didn't track a runner all game, so every time a midfield player from Leicester got forward, he basically was totally free on the edge of the box, and 3-1, and the game's virtually over. I thought at half time we could have made some substitutions to make a difference. Personally, I would have put Holgate on, even though he had a shocker last weekend, and put Charles in midfield. So at least then you'd have had Charles and Downs, some sort of midfield structure, perhaps. But he made a like-for-like substitution, which all that really did was take off our best attacker, Radosi, and put on Sulemana. So yeah, first 10 minutes of the second half, again, we looked the better side, and then we coughed up what is possibly the biggest joke goal you've ever seen. I mean, one player running through from 70 yards out, and all we've got in defence is one player on the halfway line who can't tackle and can't run. So again, a horrendous structural mistake to be left like that, and the rest of the game kind of petered out. And then just to add insult to injury, we got one sent off in the last minute, which was a bit of a Bobby Madley special, because I don't think Bobby hadn't been involved enough in the game up till that point. Hadn't had too much to do, so he decided to have people talking about him for the last minute. But Bobby Madley is not the reason we lost. I just thought the way we set up, the way we went about it, I couldn't see what the defensive structure was supposed to be when we didn't have the ball. I mean, we're doing all this very clever, allegedly inverted fullback thing, which is a stupid term, doesn't make any sense. So we were kind of three at the back when we had the ball. But when we didn't have the ball, I had no idea who was supposed to be where. And Harwood Bellis was completely on his own in defence half the time. Manning supported him a little bit, but no one else was there. Shay Charles was wide right. I don't know what Smallbone was doing defensively. He just nowhere. And Downs had a terrible game till he got injured. It was just awful. When we get to the game against Ipswich and he picks the team, only really Gavin Bazunu can be sure of his place, or should be sure of his place to start, because everyone else was dreadful. Some were more dreadful than others, but it was just a shocking performance by management, players, everything really.
Going to get on to, we'll talk about the red card, of course, but we'll get on to some of the biggest issues, what the pressing issues are for us and what they have to do to sort that out. But, I mean, Steve, is this worse than anything we've seen for quite a few years? Because to me, it felt like it driving home on Friday. I mean, we've been bad before, but 2 heavy defeats in a row, and it doesn't look like it's going to change.
Difficult to tell, because you always kind of want to put it in context of who you're up against. I mean, it's weird that, various journalists who are obviously good personal friends of Enzo Maresca have been working themselves up into a bit of a frenzy this season about how Leicester are changing how Championship football is going to be played. When, I mean, literally only last season, Vincent Kompany had Burnley playing passing football. It's not a novel concept at this level, for Guillaume Balaguer's benefit. But yeah, it's just frustrating that I think kind of from the start we all probably looked at that lineup and thought, ooh, that midfield is looking short-handed. Because while Adam Armstrong has looked quite good in that sort of deep role, pushing forward in attack when we are attacking, the problem is that if you're then putting the 2 smaller players in Downs and Smallbone, if those are your 2 pivots, then we've basically got no strength in that midfield at all. And that was basically why Shay Charles was bought in the first place. He was bought to play defensive midfield, so play him defensive midfield. We've looked a much better structure when he's been playing in that position. That half an hour against Norwich and the whole game at Plymouth where he got man of the match, deservedly so. And all of a sudden, because of an injury and because Mason Holgate had an absolute shambles of a game on debut, we've decided, no, safety net is to put him back in defence. But all that does is expose the back four to runners from midfield, because Downs and Smallbone don't track the runners. That's their role in the Russell Martin system isn't really defensive. So you do need somebody who is of a defensive mind, and Charles certainly is that, to basically sit in front of the back four and shuttle across and do that defensive work. And we've seen that obviously he's already shown that he's capable of doing that. But yeah, without him in that slot, all of a sudden the midfield is just weak, and you can just drive a bus through it. And as a result, it means that the attack gets blunted, because all of a sudden we're all dropping 10, 20 yards because the opposition are running at us, and unsurprisingly, it scares defenders and teams when the opposition are running at you. And in a game where we could easily have been making the running, as we were for, as Glenn said, about 20, 25 minutes at the back end of that first half, where we were well on top. Once we go 3-1 down, you're then back into that situation of, well, Leicester are going to be quite happy just to sit in and pick us off on the break. And I mean, as he said, that fourth goal is the sort of goal that teams score in the 94th, 95th minute, when you're only a goal down and you've thrown everybody forward.
Or kids at school.
But you've ended up somehow with our last man being Smallbone on the edge of the centre circle in their half, and they've had 4 players run past him. And it's like, how does that even happen? And that's like on the hour mark. It's just absolutely mental that we've got ourselves into that lack of shape and lack of positional discipline. I know. Let's be honest, we were warned about this sort of stuff with Russell Martin from Swansea fans, and yeah, we certainly saw them concede a fair few shambolic goals, but I'd be surprised if any of them were quite at that level.
Yeah,
and it's concerning. I mean, he can come out and say that he's proud of his players after the game, but the more you come out with nonsense like that, the quicker people are gonna make a snap judgment. Because while I think at the start of the season, obviously patience was the optimal word. People were sort of being asked to be patient. Mistakes are going to be made. We're not going to win every game. There will be defensive howlers. At the end of the day, we saw plenty of that last season. So nobody was under any illusions there. But the second you start coming out and basically trying to tell people that the sky is pink when it's blue, people aren't stupid. They can see what's in front of their eyes. It's not football is a complex game in many ways, but the very basics are very basic, and people can see that we're a defensive shambles, and that comes down to the coaching. Right. Yeah. That comes to the coaching team and the analysts and stuff, and it's not good enough, frankly.
Yeah, he could maybe get away with saying that if we were losing games by the odd goal. But we've been absolutely smashed 2 games running. So
Nathan Jones lost games by the odd goal, and he didn't get away with saying that sort of thing either. So
no, we've been annihilated.
Then nobody liked Nathan Jones. That was the thing. Nobody was willing to give him that that extra long bit of rope, because at the end of the day, he didn't need a long bit of rope. Russell Martin's come in, and up until the last 2 weeks has largely said the right things. After Sunderland, it was a complete mess, and he said so, and he kind of accepted responsibility for it. But coming out after a game like Friday nights, where at the end of the day we've probably played worse overall than we did at Sunderland, and saying that he's proud of the players and this sort of stuff. No, I'm sorry, that's just nonsense.
Alfie, he deserves a bit of criticism, I think, because of the goals that we've conceded, but there's not a lot he can do about the individual errors. To a certain extent, that's on the players, right? And I think the interview with Carl Walker-Peters afterwards was interesting, and he was saying, well, we're not doing what he's asking us to do. So, I mean, how much of the blame do they need to take for the current predicament?
Yeah, well, I think that's really interesting to listen to you, Steve and Glenn, to be fair, because it's quite interesting to hear. I don't agree that it was worse than Sunderland. I don't think it was. I think the Sunderland one was definitely a worse performance. Defensively, they were a shambles, but sort of as you said, Martin, to concede a goal in the 21st second of the game is absolutely ludicrous, and that's just simple passing. They haven't tried anything expansive. They haven't tried to invite pressure and play around it, but they just tried to play a simple pass, giving it away, and then everybody's too slow to react. The second goal is very similar. Small as a stitch goal, Peters up a little bit with a shocking pass, and then I thought that Taylor Harwood-Bellis, I'm sure that he'll be a really good player this season, but I thought he could have just diverted the ball anywhere but towards where it went at the back post and in. And then, like Glenn said, they were in the game. It wasn't awful for the rest of the first half. They were in the game. They could have been in at 2-1. I think there's a couple of misses as well. But then to give that goal away in the half-time again, just as they did for Pierre Ekwa just at half-time at Sunderland, if you look at the goal, why is Samadozi in that position? And that's management for sure, or his players not doing their job. Why is Samadozi the one that's tackling on the edge of the area? And then when he's beaten, Flynn Downs, if you look at the goal, his two centre-backs are to the left shoulder of him. The ball goes through to the right to a runner, and he just lets them walk on. He lets them carry on and lets them roll right through. There's absolutely no defence at all, no defence of the back four at all. So I think players have to take responsibility. When it's gone on for 2 or 3 years, they have to accept that. I know it's a different group, but they've not been good enough. There was missed chances, like I said. I think that they created a fair bit, actually. If you look at the stats alone, and stats don't tell you, football's not played with stats, but they did create chances, which they didn't do at Sunderland. I think they played into Leicester's box like 2 or 3 times more than Leicester did into the Southampton box. But every single time they got towards the final third, they were completely unmarked, and they were able just to walk on through. I do think Gavin Bazunu had another good game, to be fair to him. Obviously, he did well. Good couple of saves, and his distribution was really good as well. But it was interesting listening to Russell Martin because, after Sunderland, he said it was terrible. After Gillingham, he said it was terrible, and he took responsibility for those. So I thought it was going to be the same again. And then when the quotes start coming through that he's proud, and then he comes in and says the same thing to us, it was a bit of a surprise. I see certain bits of where he's coming from, but yeah, it's not good enough, is it? I spoke to Russell on Monday at Staplewood before the game, and we actually sort of chatted about this reputation for not having any give and for keeping the same tactics constantly. And he said, although the idea is we'll play with Plan A the whole time, there will be tweaks. We're not naive. We're not stupid. So I'm interested to see what those tweaks are on Tuesday, because there's going to have to be a few.
Yeah, Tuesday's going to be huge, isn't it? Well, I want to get onto that interview that you did and the time you spent with him. So maybe we'll do that at the end if we've got a bit of time. Glenn, if we're defending him, you look at the time he's been at the club, the drama, the uncertainty of the transfer window, and then there was the international break. I think Alfie pointed out, I think 4 of the starting 11 were training this week. He's had a lot to deal with. You then chuck in the injuries. You've got Stevens and Bednarek, who were both out. You think they might have made a difference had they played on Friday. So he just needs a bit of time, right?
He does, but we can't be getting thrashed like this. Because it's just. I mean, that game as a supporter was a miserable experience from the 20th second onwards. It was abysmal. It just sat there, and it's like, oh my word, this is awful. It was on a par with any of the dreadful games last season, apart from Nottingham Forest. It was just awful, because I never felt like we were getting anything out of the game. Even at 2-1, you could say there's going to be another mistake. There just seemed to be no pattern to the game. The only thing that I can think of in terms of mitigating, any mitigation, is that maybe it was some sort of tactical thing that he'd come up with specifically for the Leicester game. Yes, it didn't work, but hopefully it was just something that he'd come up with for that particular game that didn't work, and we're not going to try and do that again. Because if you play that open against anybody, you're going to be letting in at least 2 goals. In any game, against any opposition, if you play like that, you're going to let in at least 2. And then you're relying on our strikers to hit the net 3 times. And, Che Adams had another one of those, manages to hit the goalkeeper from anywhere sort of games.
Adam Armstrong as well.
Adam Armstrong was dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. He picked up the ball a couple of times, drove into space, and he just thought, oh, here we go. This is what he's good at now. And just gave the ball away, or the shooting was terrible.
I thought there was no ownership on the pitch, though. Nobody sort of took responsibility of anything. They had that short free kick where they just passed it 5 yards, and then they completely left it, and Leicester were through on goal because they just ran the length of the pitch.
It wasn't until Alcaraz and Stuart Armstrong came on that I thought people actually looked like they wanted to do something, and the game was dead by then. But those two, I thought, added a little bit that wasn't there before. But Russell Martin's got to get the balance right. as Steve said, the midfield, there was no balance in that midfield at all. There was no real grit in there. He's got to accept Will Smallbone is not a defensive player at all. He just isn't. And if you use him as one of the defensive players, it just is not going to work. He's a sort of number 8/10, the same as Stuart Armstrong, same as Alcaraz, and so my criticism of Russell Martin is he's got to get the balance right between our attacking and our defending. I mean, we joked about the rest defense thing last year because that was all we were concerned about. The Ruben Sellers picking 11 defenders basically, but you can't play with, at times in the second half, you've got Shea Charles closing down people on the halfway line and just 2 defenders behind him, one of which is Ryan Manning, and he's not the best defender. So it's just absolutely mad. So yeah, I'm not sort of advocating that Russell Martin needs to go or anything like that. Of course not. But yeah, I feel that he just needs to get back to basics. You can do complicated things if you are getting to the stage where the basics are nailed down. Then you can try and tweak it, and you can play your fullbacks in midfield if that's what you want to do. But for now, the players don't seem to get whatever it is he's telling them to do, as Kyle Walker-Peters said. So just pick a back 4, put 2 defensive midfield players in front of it, and go from there, and see what happens. Because if we play like we did against Leicester, we'll get beat by Ipswich as well. So yeah, there's a few question marks, and it's not okay for Russell Martin to finish 13th this year, like it has been when he was at Swansea, like it was when he was at MK Dons. We've got to be better than that. And I'm not saying that we're entitled to finish in the top 6. We're not. And if we play like we did yesterday, we certainly won't.
Going to be nowhere near it. Steve, just quickly, I guess, what happens next for you? I mean, does he stick to his guns with the way we're playing out from the back and just somehow work on switching out and stopping the mistakes? Or is it a different style, change of personnel? Because we've got to stop conceding 4 goals every game somehow.
Well, I mean, the long and short of it is we don't have time to be coming up with a whole new system and changing things wholesale, because we've played on a Friday night, we've got the next game Tuesday, and we've got another game Saturday. You don't have enough training sessions in the week to be able to come up with a new system that we've presumably not worked on, because plan A was plan A and it's also plan B from the start of pre-season. That's kind of where we've kind of expected to be. We knew that was, I think that's kind of what you kind of almost accept when you appoint a sort of ideologue as a manager, when they've got one way that they want to play and they're going to play it. So you don't work on anything else. So I think realistically the only changes that can be made are likely to be personnel. Must admit, I was surprised Che Adams started Friday, given that he'd started for Scotland only 3 days previous and had basically been given the complete runaround by England at Hampden Park.
That was his first start too, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah. No, he started at Plymouth as well, didn't he? I think.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, he's not played an awful lot, but yes, that's probably even more surprising that he got the start in this one. But I guess
it's not him, who is it? Adam Armstrong.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, then I guess you're then looking into the sort of false 9 front 3, where we've had a lot of false 9s over the years, haven't we?
One of them scored today, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah, and it's yeah. I mean, I guess in that situation you kind of look at it and think, well, okay, who else is there? But then if you're putting a player out there who's not going to be able to do it for 90 minutes or even for an hour, then I mean, you've probably not got the right guys in there. So yeah, it's frustrating that we're already in sort of backpedaling mode and saying, okay, how do we fix this? I mean, ultimately we've got to get through this month. And actually, one of the fixtures that is surprisingly actually going to be sort of one of those where you could look to get yourself back on the road is that game on Saturday at Middlesbrough, because they've been surprisingly awful. And I mean, I know they get to play Sheffield Wednesday on Tuesday night, so they might play themselves back into form. But having lost basically their two key players from last season, they've not really started this season. I think they got a point from a point so far all season. So yeah, I mean, we obviously know what will happen now on Saturday, but yeah, I think you're now looking at these two games, and I think you've got to just steady the ship. But how you do it realistically with the time available, it's personnel. You're chopping and changing and just trying to stumble upon the right combination. But I think that's got to start with that base of midfield, and Shea Charles has got to play there. You pick the centre backs behind him based on who else is available. If it's Mason Holgate, it's Mason Holgate. Fine.
Bednarek should be back, so that's a boost.
Well, if he is, then that probably solves that problem immediately. Then doesn't it?
It's not often we've said that on this podcast, is it? Bednarek's back, and that's going to be a boost. Just before we put the game to bed, I'm going to ask you for a player of the week as well. Alfie, just on the red cards. I mean, I was in the car on the way home by then. So reds, do you think, or do you think they're going to appeal it? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think Glen's assessment before we went on air was correct, that Boy Madley hadn't anything to do all game, and therefore he just wanted a chance to steal the light. And I don't think it's a red card, to be honest. I can see people say that the studs were up and it went down onto the player, but I asked Russell Martin about it after, and they will appeal if they think there's grounds to, but he hadn't seen it back at the time, so not too much to report on that really. But I'd like to think they'll appeal it, but he's not available for Tuesday in any case. I mean, how long does that take, Stephen? Glen's usually a week or two.
Because of the fact that there is a game Tuesday, they can put the appeal in Monday and they'll hear it that day.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it should be more or less instant.
Well, yeah, that's good, because if Samandozi's gone off for knock and isn't fit for Tuesday, then they're down to Ryan Fraser and Sekou Mara on the wing again. So they could probably do with him.
Although Mara seemed to do quite well on the international duty, so maybe he's a guy.
They all do when they're away.
They all do, yeah. Under 21s football as well. So,
player of the week for you, Steve. Anyone stand out?
There's only really two options for me. I mean, Gavin Bazunu had one of his best games for us, which is frankly a ridiculous thing to say when we've lost 4-1 at home. But I thought he was very good. Made a handful of really good saves. That one in the first half was excellent. I thought the one where he tipped the shot wide. From Ndidi, I think, was it? From distance. And yeah, I think his distribution is getting better. He's playing in a system now which suits that style, which it didn't last season. That's for sure.
I think he's brave as well, to be fair, when he's on the ball, because he gets a lot of there's a lot of G's to get it forward and stuff, but he never seems to. And when he does, he usually picks the right time, in fairness.
Yeah. Glen, standout player for you?
Yeah, and Bednarek. He became a better player through not playing.
Yeah, well, we had that last week, didn't we?
Honestly, I mean, sensible answer. Bazuni's the only one that I can pick. The rest of them were crap. So I got absolutely nothing to say about the rest of the players. I mean, Armstrong and Alcaraz, I mentioned that they only played 20 minutes each or whatever.
Dozy, possibly.
It's a nice finish from Dozy.
Dozy out a push for half the game, but no, Bednarek for me.
Same for you, Alfie?
Yeah, there's nothing more to say about that, is there, really?
Okay. Ipswich are the visitors to St Mary's on Tuesday evening. Joining us to help preview that game, I'm pleased to say, is Ben from the Blue Monday podcast. Ben, how are you? You all right?
I was all right before I listened to the last 10 minutes of you lot talking about Friday night. Cheer up, lads. Come on.
We've had this for about 3 years. So, I mean, you're absolutely flying at the moment. I mean, did you think that you'd be, sitting third in the table after 6 games? This is just like the stuff of dreams at the moment. The best start.
No, absolutely. Of course we didn't. No. I always maintain if you're a League One team with momentum, a promoted team, I think you've got about 6 to 8 weeks of kind of head start on your pattern of play and your momentum against teams, like yourself, who've had a transfer window, a new manager and all of this, pattern of play is not settled. You've got that time to sort of bank. And there's been a few coin flip games where if we weren't super confident and have basically been winning since February, we wouldn't have won them. But you're you know what it's like with football. You get on these runs and the muscle memory kicks in, and it's just kept going. And 5 wins from 6. We all sat there before the season, and you know if you can get, I don't know, 8 points from 5 games, you would have been well chuffed. And it's 15 points from 6 is just way beyond anything we expected, but I will take it.
Unfortunately, ours is a different sort of muscle memory that kicks in. The away for, is it 9 points from 9 away from home? I mean, that's outstanding. Is that down to the motivation and the sort of the carryover, like you say, from last season?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you saw our game on opening day. Sunderland they had 2 spells where we were clinging on basically, and again, we're just used to winning. QPR was exactly the same. That was a coin flip, and actually, they had to take out Sinclair Armstrong and Sam Field, and it's just, I know you don't want to hear it when you just conceded 9 goals in 2 games, but just everything seems to be going in. I know you have to take advantage of those things when they happen and be playing well and have a good flow to your game. But I agree with whoever it was said about Sheffield Wednesday, because that was when you talk about having a 6 to 8 week advantage from promotion. If you don't have a chaotic summer, I think they are the proof that if you do silly things and your owner rungs and mock, then you can completely throw that advantage away. So that was a comfortable win, but obviously Southampton away may not be quite as easy.
Well, I mean, we'll see, because what is a given is that you'll probably score in the first 2 minutes. But what sort of football are we going to see after that? What sort of team are we going to see?
Well, I mean, you joke, but that's the hope, isn't it? We were all watching. I mean, I had to double take on I was actually at Birmingham Millwall covering that game, and your 5-0 came in. What? It's kind of the most championship scoreline in history. I'm like, how has that happened? And I was watching on Friday night, and look, it's patently obvious that budget, player for player caliber, Ipswich are not as good as Southampton. We all get that, but if you've got this hoodoo in your head, and the fans are maybe a little bit suspicious about the pattern of play, and the players haven't quite got it yet, and these early goals are going in, I think every single Ipswich fan is going to have their fingers crossed that we can score an early goal, because you know what that's going to do to the atmosphere there. And listening to your conversation, I hate to say it, guys, I've done League One, MK, I've done Championship Swansea. He ain't going back to basics. He'll double down on Tuesday. You know he will. So we've got our fingers crossed that's going to be the case, and we catch you at the right time, because obviously, as I say, player for player, budget, etc., it's a mismatch. But we're in that 6 to 8 week period, and we have our fingers crossed.
What's that first 5 minutes going to be like, Glenn? I mean, it's going to be nervy, isn't it? It's going to be absolutely huge. I've a good mind to just stay in the concourse maybe, and then just take my seat a bit later.
Well, if we kick off, I hope we just take one touch, and then like that Peter Kay commercial, just launch it out the ground. But obviously, we're not going to do that. I mean, no matter what you say, no matter what Russell Martin says to fans about, keeping calm and trying not to transmit stuff to the players, if we start passing the ball across the 6-yard box, then it's going to get nervy. It's bound to, after the starts we've made in the last 2 games. I mean, we were 1-0 down after 20 seconds. We really should have been 2-0 down after about 3 minutes. Harwood Bellis did a crazy pass.
Harwood Bellis is a great player, by the way. He was superb, absolutely superb for Burnley.
I'm sure he would be, but you could have dropped Paolo Maldini into that place with the shambles that was going on around him. Yeah, I'm sure Harwood Bellis will be talking about him in 6 months' time, saying what a great player he was. But no, I'm not looking forward to the first 5 minutes. But we have to negotiate that, and we have to make sure that we, I know I say back to basics, but we can't afford to do anything really, really stupid at the start of the game, because another sort of like abysmal fan experience like we had on Friday night is not going to be fun for anybody, and ultimately we will end up losing the game if we start terribly again. So optimistic that there will be lessons learned, because at least there were 2 weeks between the Sunderland and this game. If you can't learn a few lessons when it's still that fresh in your memory 4 days later, then you are struggling a bit. So yeah, it will be nervy, but hopefully we'll manage it a little bit better than we did on Friday.
You mentioned fan experience, Glenn. I would pay good money to see the responses to that email that gets sent out about the fan experience survey. They still do it. They still do it.
Tone deaf. But
Yeah,
I mean, it's clearly
crazy
some automated
Yeah, of
system.
course.
Surely there's got to be a sort of big red button of abort.
I'm going to get score predictions from you in just a moment. I mean, Alfie, just finally, I mean, this is not the game we wanted when the team is really fragile, is it? You don't want to be playing. You don't want to be playing a team that are good away from home, someone that's got their tails up. This is the game that we don't really want on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I was just listening to Ben. I was just having a look at Ipswich's results as well, and they've defensively, apart from Leeds and obviously the other day I can't remember against who, they've actually been pretty good. I think 4 clean sheets out of the 6 or 7 games this season, including the cups as well. So
Clean sheets, what are they?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's a miracle, isn't it? So we'll have to see. I mean, I'm nervous. They'd have much rather play this game at Portman Road. I'm sure of that. You know, St Mary's is going to be a very interesting place on Tuesday, and I just agree with Glenn. I almost just hope for the players' sake that they just don't do anything fucking stupid in the first 10 minutes. Because if they give away a goal, it's going to be hell in there. And it must be an incredibly tough atmosphere to play in. And, you know, Russell Martin did his best to not blame supporters, which is a nice positive on last season, but. You know, he did say that it's not easy for them, you know, in that atmosphere, and it is not easy, to be fair. He understands the fans and all this sort of stuff, but yeah, it's going to be tough.
All right, let's get some score predictions then, Ben, because I know you've got to go and do your own podcast tonight. So, how do you think it's going to play out? Score prediction from you first, Ben.
I mean, everything goes towards both teams to score, doesn't it? The way we're attacking and the way you're defending and the kind of quality that you guys have got, and we expect the shot count to be high. I will actually stand up for Russ Martin for 1 sec. I did agree in his interview. I get the
even as an ex-Norwich player.
I get the I'm proud of the players is a bit jarring, but he was right that Leicester presented Southampton with chances as well, and Leicester's final ball and finishing was absolutely bob on, and perhaps Southampton's wasn't. So yeah, both teams to score. Look, we've got Blackburn at the weekend at home on Saturday, which would appear on paper to be an easy game. We've beaten Sheffield Wednesday. If the 3-game weekend's with 6 points, then we're laughing. If we leave with anything and goals, we'll be super, super happy with that, given the context that it's 3 games. So I'm going to sit on the fence, and I'll go for some kind of scoring draw with probably 35 shots between both sides.
Well, thanks for joining us, Ben. I'm going to let you go because, as I say, you've got your own podcast to do, and we'll catch up later in the season, hopefully. So
yes, I'll be down there on Tuesday. So yeah, looking forward to
nice
it.
Stuff. All right, cheers, Ben. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers.
I mean, it's going to be an interesting one. Steve, score prediction from you for Tuesday?
I'm done with being stupidly optimistic with
yes, we're back
for the time being. So 3-2 defeat.
3-2 defeat. I think we will score, but I think they'll get 3 because I think every time they have a shot on target, it'll end up going in like before. Glenn.
Oh, I'm gonna still stay on the optimism train. We will sort it out. It won't be fun. I think it'll be high scoring again. I'll go for a 3-2 win.
Okay. Alfie, do you think the lessons will be learned? Are they going to watch this one back?
If Steve and Glenn both went for a positive result or a negative result, I was going to go for a positive one. But as Glenn's gone for a win, I'll stick for a draw and say 2-2 draw.
Okay. Well, if you're watching live, don't forget to put your predictions into the comments. And yeah, we'll see you on Tuesday. At the weekend, it's another long trip north to Middlesbrough, and we're going to preview the game. Now, Dana from the Boro Breakdown Podcast is with us to preview this one. Thanks for coming on. After losing to Coventry in the playoffs last season, this is probably not quite the kind of start you'd have been expecting. Is it just not quite clicking yet? Things not quite gelling?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, you could say that. There's a whole host of problems at the moment. I think Carrick is trying to manage the expectations set from last season, and we have a completely different team. We don't have the loanees that we had last season, and therefore there is a lot of difference. And I think football fans always want results instantly, and I just don't think that's going to happen with us, to be honest. I did think that we would have a few teething issues, but not quite this drastically bad. I mean, I just listened to his talk there about a couple of iffy results for you guys, but at least you've got more than 1 point on the table. I mean, Christ alive, the fact that Sheffield Wednesday are above us. I mean, we play them on Tuesday. I said on our podcast we're going to have a shit off. We've had a dreadful start to the season, and what positive can I say? It's it's been really bad, guys.
This is better. I can't be handling the optimism of the Ipswich fans. You're amongst friends. Are they playing good football and just not getting the results? Because that's what the manager would have you believe in some of his interviews.
Yeah, he's bound to say that though, isn't he? You know what? I think at the very, very beginning of the season, I think there were some good signs. But to be honest, the QPR game before the international break was terrible. Honestly, we are very, very slow in possession. Last season, the exact opposite. We were very incisive, very quick, slick. We knew exactly what we were going to do because the players knew each other's games really well. This season, it has just been incredibly slow, sluggish, predictable, static. There's so many buzzwords that I can throw at you that describes us. And I think there has been glimpses the last 40 minutes against Blackburn. We were better, we were probing, but to be honest, we had to. We were 2-0 down. You know, we couldn't exactly just kind of camp in and around the center of the pitch and just, I don't know, expect someone to pluck a goal out of the sky. It's been poor, and results have showed that. There's not, we tried to search for positives from the Blackburn game, and that 40-minute spell in the second half where we had to go for it was pretty much the only thing that we could come up with, to be honest. So, yeah, it's not great up in Teesside at the moment.
What's the atmosphere going to be like? What's the home form be like? Is it a case of the teams will come, get an early goal, and then it turns a little bit? Does that make it difficult? Is that the key?
Yeah, I think if you score first, Boro fans are a passionate bunch. The old cliche about North East football supporters being incredibly passionate is very true. I think that's the case for all fans, though, to be honest. But I think if you guys score first, I do think the crowd will turn, and you might. I mean, we were booing. I wasn't booing, but there were fans booing at Ewood Park on Saturday, and I was kind of thinking, well, what are we booing at? Are we booing at the players? Are we booing at Carrick? Are we booing at the chairman? It's a very confusing spot that we're in at the moment, but there is pressure that's mounting on Carrick. There's a corner of Middlesbrough fans that are already saying that if he doesn't win on Tuesday, then there might be reason to suggest that he should go, which is crazy thinking about how good we were last season.
Does he not have a whole load of credit in the bank for that last season, given that he obviously took over in October, November when Wilder left, when you were awful, similar to what you've started this season, and then suddenly you end up in the playoffs. So has he not kind of earned himself the right to have a bit of an iffy start and kind of trust him to work it out in the end?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I think this is Carrick's first job in senior management. Obviously, he had that spell at interim charge at Man United, but this is very different to that. And I think, spot on what you said there, Steve, I think he has built up that time, and he probably is allowed that time to firstly make mistakes. As I said, this is his first spell as a senior manager, and he's going to have his inexperience is going to show. But because of how good he made the team last season, I think he has allowed that time to maneuver through this really bad period and hopefully see the better side of it on the other end. But yeah, it's a tricky spot at the moment because as I said, like football fans, they always want results instantly, but they don't want that growing period. They can accept that we have development players and players with potential, but they still want results right now. And football's a tricky one, isn't it? It's a very unforgiving, impatient sort of atmosphere.
You think, Glenn, this might be the game to get things back on track? It's a shame this one's not on Tuesday night, really.
Well, when the fixture list came out, you sort of like see this month, and Ipswich at home was the one you think was a banker, and Middlesbrough away, because of how well they did last year, you think, well, that's going to be a really, really difficult one. As far as we're concerned, I mean, obviously a lot will depend on the mood after the Ipswich game on Tuesday, but if we get beat by Ipswich, then we can't be going to Middlesbrough and getting beaten again. But both teams' seasons, it could be quite significant changes on the midweek games, as Dana said. If they get beat by, is it Sheffield Wednesday you're playing?
Mm-hmm.
If you get beat by then, the mood is going to be almost suicidal up there on Saturday, isn't it? And likewise, if we get beat by Ipswich, it will suddenly become a huge game. But if either team picks up a win midweek, then the pressure's off a little bit. So I hope for your sake, Dana, that you win the game on Wednesday or whenever it is.
Yeah. I don't think I can hack losing to Sheff Wed, because before the season started, I earmarked them as the worst team in the league, and the fact that we are currently worse than the worst team in the league, that's not good. So
making predictions like that will always come back and bite you.
Yeah, it will. To be fair, I don't think Sheff Wednesday fans could argue with that, to be fair. So, it is what it is. To be fair, I did say second for us as well. So that I've already got half the egg on my face there. Against second now.
Do you think away from home might help a bit, Alfie? I mean, a lot of this depends, of course, on Tuesday night and how it goes. But it's going to be that first 5 or 10 minutes against Ipswich is going to be so key, and I think that has a big say on how this game plays out on Saturday.
Yeah, it's tough to talk about a game that's a week when you've got one in between. To be fair, because like Glenn said, the mood can completely change based on what happens Tuesday. But I think they'll definitely be happier to be away from home at the moment. Whatever it is, for the last 2 or 3 years, just can't seem to get a result with St Mary's. I know they have done against QPR, but I think Middlesbrough only scored 4 goals in 6 games, is it? So, I mean, Gavin Bazunu might be eyeing up that clean sheet.
Clean sheet.
And I've looked at it as well. Only one team have conceded more than Middlesbrough this season as well, whoever they are. There's a chance for some goals.
I'm going to get some score predictions from you. Dana, do you want to start? I appreciate you got the game on Tuesday as well, but if I can get a score prediction from you for Saturday.
Oh, well, you know what? I know you just said there that you've conceded more goals than us, but we can't seem to hit a barn door at the moment. I mean, the way that we scored against Blackburn actually came from a really crap shot, and then Crooks managed to tap it in, and he was about 10 yards offside somehow. Inept EFL refereeing, but we'll take it. A goal on the board. I am going to go with, I think we will score. I think it'll be a 2-1 defeat for us. I think you'll win.
Okay.
You'll scrape the win there.
I agree, actually. I'd put a 2-1 down when I was thinking about this earlier. Steve, prediction from you?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I kind of think that eventually we're going to have to keep a clean sheet, even though Boro can't score to save their lives, we will find a way of giving them one. So, but I think at the other end, as you say, they've been conceding goals almost as cheerfully as we have. So 3-1 win.
Okay, Glenn.
I'm going to say exactly the same as Steve, which I realise makes me slightly insane because I predicted us to win twice in a week, having just got absolutely smashed.
Scoring 6 goals as well.
2 games running, but yeah, no, I totally agree with the sentiment. We will let in a goal, and it might even be the first goal as usual. But I feel that we will have too much going forward for a team that is almost as bad defensively as we are. So I think our the fact that we do, despite our negativity or my negativity, still do have some good players in attacking areas. I fancy us to get some goals in that game. So yeah, I'll go for a 3-1 win.
Okay, and Alfie, a long trip north for you. You going up the day before for this one?
Yeah, I'll go up on Friday, yeah, for sure. There's been so many, haven't there, this season? We've got Newcastle, we've done twice. We've done Sunderland already. Middlesbrough's half an hour short of those, was a bit of a dream. But I'm going to go, I'll just say the goals are going to come flying in. I think it's going to be a 4-2 win.
4-2 win, blimey. Okay, again, if you're watching along live,
You don't need to hit a
can,
barn door to score against Southampton. That's not.
stick your predictions in the comments if you're watching live. Dana, thanks for coming on. Cheers,
very
that's a
much.
really useful insight. Good luck against Wednesday, and we'll catch up again later in the season if that's all right.
Yep. Thanks, guys. See you there. Good luck, but not on Saturday.
Fair enough.
Couple of other bits before we finish. Alfie, I wanted to touch on your time you spent at the training ground on Monday. Nice to be invited down, have a look around.
I'm not sure I'm going to be invited back, though, to be honest. That's my little worry now.
Just to see how the training sessions were held and sit down with Russell Martin. A lot has been said about him this week, obviously, and the result didn't help. But just your thoughts, and I read the piece, and he just came across really well.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's a shame that result happened, really, because it now feels a little bit like a sort of an X Factor sob story. Like, please don't kick me off because I've had a terrible. But he had a really tough upbringing, and you know what? Fair play to him for inviting me in. I asked to do the interview with the club, just sort of an hour to sit down and chat, and they said, "Yeah, come on in and watch training as well." And it was weird because he had 8 senior outfield players, and I think Zach Arway and one other, Prince Will, making up the numbers. Everyone else was away for international.
You should have
duty.
taken your boots. Did they not?
Yeah, I could have got a game this weekend as well, I think. But he's a really interesting guy. He lived with 3 of his brothers and a foster brother who was mum adopted, and his parents had left, and it was just him at the age of 15 and his 3 brothers, and they all worked jobs to try and pay the family and whatnot. And it's interesting where he's come from. He's very new wave, very modern. He's not a massive fan of organized religion, but he's spiritual, and he sort of takes aspects of Buddhism, and he does visualization every now and then, and he believes in karmic retribution. So I don't know what he's done as a defender to concede this many goals if he believes in karma. But it's interesting, and he's a good guy, and this is why you want these people to do well, because you do back him, and you do want him to do well, and I think they do care. And that's why I was surprised about his comments after the game, to be fair. I think he genuinely believes that the Southampton performance was good, because he's been honest up to now. I don't see why that would change. I know there's an element of protecting the players and all this kind of thing, but he said that hopefully I can come back and sort of sit in on a few meetings and stuff like that in the future. We'll see if that comes to fruition. I'm a little bit worried now. Luckily, he's not superstitious, actually, so maybe I shouldn't be too worried about it. But yeah, it feels weird to talk about it now, but it's worth a go back and have a read and just sort of check up on what he said, because it was interesting.
And you would like to think that these poor results and the rut that we're in at the moment is going to pass, and it will all start to click. I'm still positive enough to think that it is going to all click and it will be okay. So maybe we look back on it then and go, actually, do you know what? This is the kind of manager that we need, especially after the last 2 that we've had, because you wouldn't have been able to do that with them.
No, he wouldn't. He's obviously a people's person. I'm sure he knows what he's doing to an extent. I'm sure he knows that he wins support of supporters and media by doing this kind of thing. But the players have said the same thing, haven't they? Carl Peters, when George spoke to him on the weekend, said the same thing. First and foremost, it was Southampton, but of course, talking to the manager was great. And then we actually had lunch with Russell as well, very briefly, and we were talking off the record, and the way he interacts with Joe Lumley, Ross Stewart, who was there. You can see that he's a person who cares about it, very honest with them, and you just want him to do well. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting week.
It's just this week will define the rest of the season, won't it, Glenn? Because if you, like you say, if we don't get the result on Tuesday, and then if we can't get anything on Saturday, then God help us.
It just makes it. I don't think it really, defines the season. But I mean, worst case scenario, we've got 4 defeats in a row. That's not the sort of thing that anybody, really expected to happen going into this season in the Championship, regardless of the churn of players and stuff like that. We have expectations this season set by the club to be one of the better sides in this division.
Yeah.
And getting beat 4 times in a row, let alone by the number of goals we have been getting beat by, is not part of the plan. Russell's got this thing that's followed him around at every club he's been at, that he can't sort the defence out. And it's a worrying thing, letting in 9 goals in 2 games, and having let in more than anybody in the league, I think.
It's actually a record, isn't it? I think I saw someone say it's a championship record in 5 or 6 games. Yeah.
I think you tweeted something out, Alfie, that we've let in 16 goals in 6 games, which is about 10 too many, and that is correct. And some of them have been horrible. It's not all the passing out from the back stuff. It's the lack, the lack of tracking from midfield, the not stopping crosses coming into the box. It's Steve's hobby horse. There's so many basic things that we do not do defensively. Have we got an actual defense coach, or is?
I don't know if there's anyone specifically assigned to that. No.
Yeah,
the set
Maybe they
piece
need
coach,
one.
isn't there? They've
Set
got the
piece
set
coach is
piece.
working wonders already.
set piece coach, but we just don't look organised, and it worries me. But I mean, when I watched the Sheffield Wednesday game, we looked like we had a structure. We had a back four, we had a player in front of the back four, and then we had
James Ward-Prowse,
2 number 8s. So obviously, we had better players at that time. And if we'd had that structure against Leicester, I felt like we could have got something out of the game. But for some reason, we tried something different. So yeah, I hope Russell Martin gets it right. A win on Tuesday would put everybody back on the front foot again, and you could write these 2 games off as a blip. But if you lose 4 games in a row, it's a little bit. So yeah, these 2 games will define the mood of a lot of supporters going forward.
I think I read somewhere this week at the current rate we're on track to concede 120 goals this season, which is not really going to get us in the top 6, is it? But Steve, I mean, I'm sure you've read the article as well, and you know enough about the man now. How long do you think we've got to wait? Patience is the key. We've said that quite a few times now. What's your sort of gut feeling before it all starts to click?
Christ knows. It's weird because those first 4 games, like in attack, I think we looked competent. We looked like we had a plan, and that ultimately our better players would see us home in so many games. And certainly in those first 4 games, that was the case. We got goals quite late in games. Certainly in those first 3. Which got us points, and basically it seemed as if we were going to be able to essentially outshoot teams. Now maybe it's just because we've come up against 2 teams who are of the better teams in the league. I mean, Sunderland have surprised me. I mean, they were obviously good last season, but they've basically lost their two most attack-minded players from last season. But I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that you look at like people have said, oh, we signed too many young players. We need more experience in this team. And you look at Sunderland, and they've basically got a load of 17-year-olds,
16-year-old giving us a lesson.
And yeah, it's not.
In the last 2 games, Steve, I think the difference in the back 4 was the same in the first 4 games, unbeaten. They then lost Jack Stevens, obviously, and then they lost Jan Bednarek in succession. I mean, how much does that play a role? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fairly important. I mean, those 2 are obviously vastly experienced. I mean, not the best defenders in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but you would think they're good enough for championship level. And they've played together before at a higher level. So yeah, you would imagine that centre-back pairing. I mean, when Stevens is fit, I mean, is that still going to be our first choice? I guess I think it might still be.
I'd like to think that someone like Taylor Howard-Bellis would have made a big enough impression by 8 weeks' time or whatever it is.
Well, I mean,
we'll see.
You would hope so, but I mean, if it goes the way of Friday night much, sort of on many more occasions, then perhaps not. And it's just infuriating, isn't it? That we can clearly see that the players individually are good enough. They've shown that. The ones that we've had in the squad over a period of time, they've shown individually that they're capable. And now I think that's basically 4 managers in the space of a year have kind of struggled to get quite the right blend and get the cohesion between them. So maybe it's not actually the managers that are the problem, and that we've kind of got the wrong players. I don't know. I mean, look, it's the last 2 games have been chastening experiences for those of us who looked at the first sort of 4 games and thought, okay, well, we've done enough here, and actually we've done better than we expected given the upheaval off the pitch. And it's weird that basically as soon as the transfer window's shut, that actually when the point at which we thought, oh, well, this will all calm down now and we'll be fine, and no, we've basically lit a match somewhere, and it's all going up in flames.
Going to be a big week.
Yeah, while Russell Martin sits there with his cup of tea, saying this is okay, like that meme. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, things have got to improve, and they've got to improve pretty quickly because, I mean, let's be honest, the last couple of years we've seen how quickly, not just our fan base, but all fan bases, I think everybody is much less patient than they used to be, and the mood will turn quite quickly if there isn't some sort of visible sort of sign that things are at least being looked at and things are becoming a little bit more organised. Because the last two games, especially defensively, has been an absolute mess.
Yeah, we just need a good performance on Tuesday night and a clean sheet, and all is forgiven. There was one team that learned from their defeat at Sunderland, the Saints women's team today. Great result. Don't know if you caught the result earlier. 4-1 winners against Reading, which was decent. A start and a goal for Atlanta Primus as well. Does that mean they're back at the top now, Steve?
Top and goal difference ahead of Palace, who seem to be sort of pushing a bit financially this year. They've signed a couple of good players on loan from Super League sides in the last week or so. So yeah, they're looking strong. But as I said a couple of weeks ago, we seem to have worked out how to score goals finally. So the sort of attacking pressure that we built up in games last season, where we just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net, we're now scoring those goals. So yeah, I mean, looks promising. It's going to be an interesting season. I mean, obviously you got that still got the nonsense with the only one team going up thing, but until the FA pull their head out of the sand, that's going to continue to be the case. But yeah, you just kind of hope that that we can carry on the way we're going, and the title's there for probably 3 or 4 clubs, I think.
Yeah, interesting season. Just finally, some sad news this week that former academy player Ben Cole passed away, aged just 24. I know there was a statement, Alfie, I saw you did a piece about this, but someone that had played for, was it England under 16s?
Yeah, Saints Academy. And, I think that Ben, I don't know Ben personally, I've never spoken to him. I don't know Daisy, his partner, either, but, I think he's been fighting this since 2017. But I think in one of his Instagram posts, he said that he's had a really good 6 years. Although he's been fighting it for 6 years, it hasn't been, all fighting and suffering. He's had a really good time. He's made the most of it. So, really emotional, really touching, and it makes you realise that there are a lot more important things.
Yeah, puts it into perspective. If you're going to the Ipswich game, there is going to be a minute's applause before the game in memory of Ben. That's it for this week's episode. Don't forget that you can follow Total Saints Podcast on Facebook and Twitter. It's at Total Saints Pod. We're also on Instagram and Threads. You'll find us if you search for Total Saints Podcast on there. And as you'll know, if you're watching the podcast on a Sunday evening, we live stream TSP every week on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. And we love hearing from you throughout the week. So do get in touch, drop us a DM on any of the socials, or you can email us at totalsaintspodcast@yahoo.co.uk if you've got something you'd like to share. We're also on Patreon, where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. It's patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. There's 4 tiers ranging from £5 to £20 per month. Each of the tiers comes with its own perks, including some weekly shout outs for the patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tier. So thanks to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Andy Hollis, Matt Hall, Anthony Thompson, Saints in Exile, Gavin Ford and James Haran in the Francis Benali tier, and also to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Matt Rose, and Nick Reed, who are in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you, Steve. Thanks to Glenn. Thanks to Alfie. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you again next week.